divide and conquer has been a major strategy throughout history. We really see that in the Middle East right now, all over the Middle East, in Iraq, but also all over the Middle East, where you've got the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Jewish people. And you can get those three groups at a party in New York City or something else, in a business in the United States, and they'll get along. I know a lot of instances of that. But you can also create the tension there. And I happen to believe that that's very intentional, because chaos and destabilization, mayhem, work to the advantage of the conqueror, of the empire, of the oil companies, for example, in the Middle East. As long as we have Sunnis and Shiites and Israelis fighting each other, they can't come together to fight the common enemy, which is us, which is the oil companies, which is the corporatocracy. And I think a fascinating thing has happened in Latin America. In the last few years, we've seen 8 countries elect democratically a president who has stood up and said, no more exploitation. If I win the presidency, this exploitation will stop. Ecuador's oil needs to help Ecuador's poor people. Bolivia's gas needs to help Bolivia's poor people. And this coalition has happened throughout these countries, where places that, since the time of the conquest, you had the military and the indigenous people at loggerheads with each other, enemies. And suddenly in the last few years, they've come together and voted in a Correa of Ecuador or Morales of Bolivia. They've come together and they voted in the guy who said, enough's enough. It's the outside world that's the enemy. It's not our own people against each other. It's been very fascinating to see how that's happened. And it's now happened in 7 countries in South America, 1 in Central America, and a couple of others are tipping in that direction. But in South America, this represents more than 80% of the population. It's a true revolution. And it's been peaceful. There's been no bloodshed. A few demonstrations in the streets, but nothing at all. And I think it sets a tremendous model for the world. If this can happen among such diverse groups in Latin America, it can happen in Africa. It can happen in the Middle East. It can happen in the United States. And Africa is another example where we've constantly said the problem with Africa is corrupt officials, but we don't address the fact of who corrupted them. Corruption doesn't grow on trees. Somebody corrupts you, and somebody's corrupted these officials in Africa, us. And we've also said it's tribal warfare. Well, yeah, there's been tribal antagonism, but so much of that has been stirred up over the last couple of 100 years by the colonial powers, and now by us. By the oil companies, by the corporatocracy that goes in and stirs up this tribal antagonism. We see that in Darfur, we see that in Congo, we see that all over Africa. But in South America, we've seen something very different happening, and I think that can serve as a model if the rest of the world will just look to that and say, the real enemy is not our own people. The real enemy are those from outside who are exploiting us. So let's all come together and resist this, and let's do something that's right for us. And I believe that the people of the United States have an amazingly important role to play in this, because it's to our advantage to create a peaceful, environmentally sustainable, and socially just world. We must do that. We have to recognize that our grandchildren will not be able to inherit such a world unless every child being born in Nigeria and Indonesia and Palestine and Israel and Bolivia and Guatemala has that same opportunity, because for the first time in history, we really are one community. We're a very, very small world. We really are one community. And I think it's so important that we recognize that our own self-interest is fostered by helping these groups in other countries come together and use their resources to get rid of their own poverty. They don't want our foreign aid. They know that that's a game, that's a seduction. They don't want it. They just want to be left alone to use their resources to help their people. And we, the people of the world, we the people of the United States, we the people of the world, we need to look at ourselves as the people of the world, not as just the people of the United States, but as the people of the world. We need to come together and also insist that that happen, and recognize that it's to our best interest and our children's and grandchildren's best interest. And when we do that, things will change.